You have heard that it was said, 'Do not commit adultery.' But I tell you, everyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, gouge it out and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of the parts of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of the parts of your body than for your whole body to go into hell." I mean, we could keep reading, but that's probably enough for one morning, right? It's hard what Jesus says here. And I don't know, because a lot of us have grown up and lived maybe 20, 30, if you might have been a Christian for 40, 50 years, you've read this verse many times. It's the shock of it may have worn off on you a little bit. But if you're sitting there on that mountain that first time, and you're one of those 12 disciples that's listening to Jesus, his main audience for this teaching, that's tough. And it was shocking. Because up until Jesus makes this clear, we had pretty well justified and rationalized as human beings ourselves out of what he has to say here. And because it wasn't worded quite this way, we could find loopholes, and we could say, well, I didn't commit adultery. I didn't cheat on my wife or my husband or whoever. I didn't do any of those things, so I didn't do anything wrong. And Jesus says, yeah, but I know what you were thinking. Well, nobody's supposed to know what you're thinking, are they? I mean, let's be honest. You thought nobody was supposed to know what you were thinking. And you didn't want anybody knowing what you were thinking. And some of you look scared. I don't know what you were thinking. So anyway, we don't like that idea. And Jesus says, the truth is, you heard it said, don't commit adultery. And it's true every time he uses that kind of phrase in the Sermon on the Mount, he says, but you know what was always true? I know what you think. Isn't that scary? 1 Chronicles 28, 9 and 10. I would urge you to commit that to memory. I've shared it with you before. It's where David is presenting to Solomon the plans for the temple. And he gives David those plans. Now, David can't build the temple because there's too much blood on his hands. We usually read that like it's because he was a very successful military king. I'm not sure that that's actually the problem. I'm more and more convinced the too much blood on his hands was Uriah's. But David was a murderer. He was, in God's grace, he was forgiven. He had repented by that time. But he had been a murderous adulterer. And it didn't start with the adultery. It started when he was up on the roof of his house, out on the balcony, wherever he was, looking down at a lady in a tub that he should not have been watching. It started with his eyes, and it started with his heart. And Jesus is trying to get us to understand that's where it always begins. It always begins in the heart. Sometimes even before the eyes, it can begin in the heart. What those old tools of Satan that he uses over and over again are the same. The lust of the eye, the lust of the flesh, and the evil pride of life. Every single one of those three hit David that day as he watched from his palace, and he acted on it. It's easy for us to say, well, if I don't act on it, though, it's not really a problem, is it? That's not what Jesus said. So let's look at this. We're going to look at his key phrase here first, Sorry, I have to back up. I'm just going to have to do that, okay, every now and then, because I can't see what's going on behind me. And so there is where he says, I had to get way back. But I tell you, everyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Don't let the pronouns fool you. Ladies, it's true for you too. One time years ago, a friend of mine, acquaintance of mine more, wrote an article on this verse. And in the comments on the article, they were just going after men like crazy. Men are horrible, men are this, and it was all men. But all the men were saying, yeah, men have this problem. Well, men do have this problem. This is a huge problem. Huge portions of our culture are on their way to rotten hell because of this problem. But men are not the only ones. Sometimes ladies get a pass on their lust for men. And they get to talk about things in ways that men would be divorced for talking about them in that way. And so I just mentioned that. And I didn't mention it like I was saying. I said, you know, my wife and I, because my wife and I were just talking about this the other day, and here's what she said. And do you know what happened in response? Just because I said this is an all human problem, not just one gender or another, they deleted my comment. It was a polite comment, but they deleted my comment because it didn't go with the narrative. Only men struggle with this. It's not just men that struggle with this. Even sadder, and I'm not going to get into a whole lot of things this morning in terms of data and stuff like that. I didn't want to preach that sermon this morning, to be honest. And as I prayed about this and prayed about trying to understand what does Jesus want us to get, I edited a few things out that I think we need to know and we need to understand. But I just trying to narrow the focus. But we could spend far too much time looking at the numbers of the impact of this issue in our culture. And one of the most depressing of those figures would be the number of kids who are now addicted to pornography online. That's a prayer request, not a sermon point. It's also a warning shot to parents. Do not parent on cruise control when it comes to devices and to the internet and to what they can get to. Don't be foolish and think that because you have a filter on their phone, if you do, that doesn't mean that they aren't seeing it on somebody else's at school. You need to have hard conversations. You need to have honest talks. You need to have very serious set boundaries. And parents, don't be cowards. Enforce the boundaries. If you have a gut feeling, run on it and check in with your kids. Okay? That's not easy, but if you love them, you'll do it. And I think y'all all love your kids. So do it. Don't turn into the KGB, but be an active parent and know what you're doing. There are a lot of resources out there. Don't have time to share them all this morning, but there are a lot of resources out there, Christian resources, and there's some good secular things as well, people within technology and things like that can help you to know just what's going on. But don't be naive and don't pull down the curtain and pretend the train is moving when it's not. Be a parent. Okay, so there's that. So long as you're being a parent, you might as well be a spouse too, because that's the same thing, right? The same issues and the same denials and the same this and the same that. But just be aware. It's not a new problem. Technology is actually not the issue. Technology is just one of the tools Satan uses to take advantage of the weaknesses in our hearts. It's a heart issue. And if you only address the technology, you're not going to solve the problem. Okay, this has to be taken to the cross. It has to be taken to Jesus, and it has to be dealt with on the spiritual plane, or it just finds other ways to be a problem, right? So Jesus says, you've been saying, don't commit adultery, and that's true, and that's right, but you need to go deeper. You need to understand that your heart is where he fights this war against you. Yet your heart and the things you dwell on are incredibly, deeply important if you hope to hold a marriage together. You may not be married. This totally applies to you anyway. He's addressing men who were married, a lot of them. And so that's where he goes. He was addressing a local cultural problem within Israel at the time. And so that's where he goes. But is it true of every age once you're aware of that? Yes. Is it true of both men and women? Yes. Is it true whether you're young or old? Yes. Sometimes people give the excuse, well, after you get to a certain age, those temptations, they don't happen anymore. And all I have to say to that is answer then yourself for people in the news. I'm not going to name names. I could be tempted to name names, but I won't do it. You've watched the news. You know age is not a factor, right? Affairs happen at every age till death. Somebody once told me that, as I said. They said, after that, that's all died and da, 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 da. Do you know a year later, I was sitting in that man's living room as he and another member of our church, a lady, were confessing their sins and asking for prayer because it wasn't true what he said. You may fool yourself. It'll be temporary, and you won't have fooled Satan, and you won't have fooled God. So just be aware. That's not meant to make you feel guilty. It's to wake people up. Just don't buy the lies, okay? And this is what Jesus is trying to get us to see. We are in a spiritual warfare, and a lot of that is over battlefields right here in our own heart and in our own mind. If David, for example, had just gone into the house and looked away, things could have been so much better for him. As Richard Rogers used to say, you can't stop birds flying over your head, but you don't have to let them make a nest in your hair. He said that about David there watching Bathsheba. You can walk away. You can redirect yourself. You can hold yourself accountable or have people in your life that hold you accountable. We'll come back to that here in just a little bit. First, Proverbs chapter 4. This is why it's so important. He says, guard your heart above all else. Why? Because this is where everything happens. If you're to be a faithful person, if you're to be a godly person, if you're to be a person that preserves your holiness for your spouse in the future, it all starts right in here in your heart. And the things, we think here in the heart and the head, but all this is really much more intertwined than we think. Guard your heart and guard your mind and watch the things that you dwell on and that you think about and that you see. You can't allow your thought life and your heart life to run rampant and expect the rest of your life not to be broken. Okay? Whether that is with things like lust or pornography or just watching people in ways that you shouldn't, or whether that is just your entertainment, just the thoughts that you entertain, emotional connections and boundaries that you cross that you shouldn't. It all starts in the imagination, but it doesn't end there. So guard your heart, because what you allow to happen there will eventually become what you are, who you are, and what you destroy. Okay? So guard that heart. And by the way, that was Solomon talking. Would he know? He had broken every one of those rules quite literally hundreds of times. He knew. And at the end of his life, when he wrote Ecclesiastes, if we're right about him writing Ecclesiastes, it doesn't actually put his name to it. At the end of his life, he looks at all of that and says, that was all a mess. And it was all vanity. And it was all worthless. You know what was worthwhile and what I should have given my life to, he says? Listen to what the Lord had told me. Doing what was right, doing what was honorable, and being obedient. That's what he says at the end of his life. And this is the information there in Proverbs 4 that he gives his sons. It's a biblical example of don't make the mistakes that I did. Don't do and go what I have done and where I've been. Okay? Guard your heart above all else. This is a point, okay? Identify your triggers. Everybody knows what are the things that get them onto a path where they shouldn't go, whether it's with this, what Jesus is talking about here in these verses, with adultery or fornication. If you're single, it's all the same issue. Know what your triggers are. Know what it is that makes you weak. And it doesn't necessarily have to be something like things that you look at or things that you hear or things like that. It may be places you go. It may be friends that you hang out with who push you and pull you into the wrong direction. It may be relationships where people do not respect your boundaries. If they don't respect your boundaries before you're married, what makes you think they're going to after? Right? Be really smart and wise about those things and make the decisions you need to make before it's too late, right? Know what sets you off or causes you to go down that path. It may be just simply loneliness. Satan often starts with things that are not wrong. Have you noticed that? He likes to start with things that are okay, but that can be warped. And so he will do that. Okay? It's not wrong to be lonely. Okay? But how you deal with loneliness will be good or bad, right or wrong, healthy or unhealthy. So learn how to be lonely in a godly way. You're like, but I didn't want to be lonely. I know, nobody does. But it happens. It happens to people who are married. It happens to people in a crowded room. It's going to happen. Learn how to deal with that if that's the trigger for you. And don't make decisions that are going to wreck years of your life based on moments of weakness. It's not worth it. And some of y'all could come up here, and I'm not asking anybody to, by the way, but some of you could say better why that might be true than anybody else, because you've been there, done that, and you were the number one evangelist for why not to go and do that, right? You tell people all the time and try to share wisdom that you've gained in your life. And that's what Solomon was doing there as well. But learn your triggers. He tells them in Proverbs chapter 5, you got to watch it, guys. That's because he's speaking to his sons. It's written to his sons. He says, you got to watch it. That woman is going to walk by. It's not blaming the women, but sometimes some women, it's intentional, right? She's going to walk by and she's going to done her hair. I don't know where that just came from. I don't know what that was. She is going to have done her hair, and she is going to dress up, and she is going to be enticing. And he says, and I am telling you, you better watch out, because she will eat you up and spit you out. Is that not also true the other way around? Yes, it is. Of course it is. This is, again, across the board and ageless. You watch out and don't give in, because you don't know. He's telling his sons, you're naive. You chase after things, and you're naive, and you don't know what you're getting into. Pay attention, be strong, and don't give in. Maintain your holiness. He goes on later and tells them, y'all need to be faithful to the wife of your youth and enjoy the wife of your youth. Don't be chasing after the next new thing, okay? This is not a new fishing reel. This is not a new truck. This is not new nails for the ladies. I don't know, shoes. I don't want to be, goofy examples, but you get what I'm saying. People are always chasing after something new. Not in your marriage. Not in your marriage. Don't do it. All right? So watch those things. Limit your media. Set boundaries. I'm going to repeat these even though you've been staring at them. Set your boundaries and stick to them. Have somebody help hold you accountable if you need to, and you probably do need to. In terms of accountability, the other day I was listening to a preacher out in California, and he was talking about how he holds himself accountable to his wife. And he's one of those people. He said he is super ADHD, and he was, because he had to say it 3 times to get through the sentence. But he's super ADHD and always bing, bing, bing to the new thing. And he said, I don't want that to be the way I am about my wife and about my marriage. So he said, 5 of his very close friends. And let me just say something. There is a cultural trend right now that men aren't supposed to have close friends, or they aren't supposed to have friends who are men. That is the stupidest thing I have ever heard in my life. It's not the example of Jesus. Peter, James, and John, we know who his closest friends were, don't we? It is ridiculous, and it is a word of Satan meant to trip men up. You need friends. You need friends who speak truth to you when no one else will. You need people you can rely on to be godly people praying for you and lifting you up. Do not buy the cultural lie, because it is a lie, and you know what it's meant to do, okay? Be aware. Okay, so he got 5 of his closest friends, and he tells them, listen, if you see me flirting with somebody I shouldn't be, which means not his wife, okay? If you see me flirting with somebody I shouldn't be, if you see me doing something I shouldn't be, if you see me looking at something I shouldn't be, he said, I don't want you to get onto me right there. I want you to call my wife. He said his other friends all went, what? And he said this on a huge podcast. It's one of the larger Christian podcasts. And he said, we got more comments of going, man, you're crazy. You shouldn't be doing that. You don't know what you're getting yourself into. He said, I know exactly what I'm getting myself into. A good, godly, healthy marriage. And I don't want to be in any other. He said, so I have them call my wife and say, hey, I just saw your husband. Now, is that kind of radical? Yes, it is. Would you rather do that or chop off your hand? Well, there's your choices. You want to gouge out your eye? We could do a whole point here about, oh, he's talking about hyperbole, and he is being hyperbolic. But let's not so talk about it being hyperbole that we miss the point that he's serious. Because he's serious. No, he doesn't want us to walk around looking like the Night of the Living Dead, or some of those pictures of old Civil War heroes coming back with only half their limbs. That's not what he wants the church to look like. But is he serious that it would be better to go to hell armless? Yeah, he is. Yeah, he is. Now, he's also telling us at the same time, but until you deal with the heart, because you could chop off your arm. If your heart's still in the same place, you haven't solved the problem yet, have you? Obviously, Jesus knows that. It's part of what he's trying to drive home. He just wants us to understand it is this real, and it is this eternally important. Ultimately, what Jesus is trying to help us do is to find freedom. Oh, did I already click that? I don't know. He's trying to help us to find freedom. One of the steps to get there is this one, which I didn't realize I'd already twitched my thumb, but apparently I did. Job 31:1, he says, I have made a covenant with my eyes. How then could I look at a young woman? This is Job saying, I want to do what's right. This is very similar in thought to what David says in Psalm 119 when he says, I have hidden your word in my heart that I might not sin against you. I am proactively making decisions that there are things I won't do. I'm not going to trigger myself by watching what I shouldn't watch and seeing what I shouldn't see. And the internet didn't have to exist for that to be a problem, did it? Because here's Job, thousands of years ago, saying, sometimes this is a problem, but I have made a covenant with my eyes. I have promised the Lord, these eyes will avert themselves from the things that would take me down in this way. Okay? And you will have to do that. You will have to promise yourself that you will leave like Joseph left Potiphar's wife behind. If you run, you have to run, then you run. If you have to avert your eyes, then you avert your eyes. If you have to no longer have access to things, is it better to have a streaming service or be able to keep your right hand in your eye? Which is better? Armless with a streaming service? No streaming service in arms. You see what I'm saying? Make tough decisions. Be willing to do that. Because whether or not we're willing to do those things, and not just for show, things we actually need to do, whether or not we're willing to, is whether or not Jesus really is the Lord of our life. If he's Lord of everything, yeah, but I'm still going to keep this. He's not the Lord. Let Jesus be the Lord. When you do, you will find actually freedom, because that's his ultimate goal, is to set you free from these chains that had bound you for so long. That moved. There's like a delay. That's why I keep getting thrown off. There's a major delay. Let's look back at it again. Verse 29, he says, if your right eye causes you to sin, gouge it out, throw it away. It's better for you to lose one of the parts of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. I've mentioned this several times already. Just let that sink in one more time and ask yourself this simple question. Do you believe that? And if you do, this is similar to your 3 questions on the other verse, and if you do, what are you going to do about it? Let's throw a third question in there. What are you waiting for? All right. Look here. These are some steps It's hard for me to look down there. Here are some steps. Establish, I mentioned this earlier too, establish, protect boundaries. Why would I mention that again? Because of the statistics I didn't bother to show you, okay? Because they're that bad. It's depressing. It's depressing. So establish boundaries for yourself, for your family, for one another. Hold yourself accountable, all those things. But set those things. 1 Corinthians 6, why is it so important? Why are we having to talk about this? This is why. Let's read this together. No, you don't have to read it with me, but I mean just with your eyeballs there. Flee sexual immorality. Every other sin a person commits is outside of the body, but the person who is sexually immoral sins against his own body. Let me stop there. This is his establishing thought in the rest of that paragraph. Your body is more important than you think. It really is the temple of God. He's really not talking about protein shakes and jumping jacks. What's he talking about? That this is the temple of the living God in which your heart and the Spirit of God dwells. This is the living place of the Almighty. Treat your body that way in holiness. In holiness. Other sins, he says, those are from outside the body. You know, you steal a car, that doesn't affect the temple unless you have a crash. It doesn't affect the temple. It's out there. Sex is such a tangled up emotional, psychological, and spiritual thing that it affects every single part of you. Spiritual, physical, emotional, psychological, metaphysical. Your body is affected to the point that you have a baby, the woman's DNA is forever changed by that union. Not just the baby and the DNA, the father and the DNA. It changes you forever. God knows that. He designed you. He designed you to be that way. And so, could he be protecting you from things that we still, with all the research and all those areas that we've done, do not yet quite fathom? He is. And emotionally, we know that, don't we? So, be careful with the temple, because he's not saying this to say this is worse than all other sins. What he's saying is this has a deeper impact than you understand, more than many other sins. Okay? It's just a bigger deal than we quite fathom. He goes on and says, don't you know that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have from God? You are not your own. So watch the pride thing. Well, I can do what I want to. You sure? You're not your own. For you were bought at a price. So glorify God in your body. Do what's right. Do what's holy. Do what ultimately God is trying to teach us will be healthier for us in the long run in all those different areas. Okay? All right. Set boundaries. When Paul writes to Timothy, he tells him you need to watch how you act around people. And so in chapter 5, verse 2, in verse 1, he's talking about rebuking an older man and how you do that. And then he goes into how are you going to deal with the women, Timothy? You're a man. They're women. What are you going to do? And this is what he says. He says, the older women, treat them as mothers, meaning respect. Wholesome would be the word here. Be faithful in your thoughts, Timothy. So treat the older women as mothers and the younger women as sisters with all purity. A word that we have just cut completely out of our vocabulary as a culture. Purity. What in the world is that even? With all purity. Why? Because he'll destroy everything in his ministry if he doesn't. Again, I don't need to provide you with examples. Just it's in the news on a regular basis, just a ridiculously regular basis of people in that failing that lose their ministries altogether. So watch yourself, Timothy. This is one of those ways that Satan does war, not just against you, not just against Timothy was single. See, single, it still matters. We live in a culture that says, oh, but if you're single, it doesn't matter. That's not what Jesus said. He says, Timothy, you watch yourself because this is not only how he's going to fight you. Let's be honest, we're all small fries individually, right? But if he can take out an entire ministry at a time, if he can dent the bride of Christ, he'll do it. So watch yourself. None of us lives alone. I think he just said that, didn't he? You are not your own. You've been bought with a price. So treat those people in the way that you ought to be treated, in a way that is godly. And then, so set the boundaries. In setting those boundaries, make sure other people respect your boundaries and you respect theirs. And then protect your marriage. That is a gift from God. Treat it like the precious gift that it is. You do whatever is necessary to protect that relationship. If you're married, if you're still single and dating, protect that relationship anyway. Do what's honorable and right there, and make sure that that's a holy and a godly relationship. Hebrews 13:4. Marriage is to be honored by all, and the marriage bed kept undefiled, because God will judge the sexually immoral and adulterers. Again, he's not sitting there just trying to threaten people. What's he saying? He's saying this is a reality. This is an issue. This is one of those things that's a right and a wrong. So be aware of that. But he goes further. He says, honor marriage. It should be honored by everybody, he says. Make that a special, holy, godly relationship that is reflective, if we want to go into Ephesians 5, reflective of what Christ feels for the church. That's why husbands are told to love their brides like Christ loves the church. It's that special, and to be that guarded and protected a relationship. Nobody else gets to come into that. Nobody should. So purity isn't just avoidance. I think this is important, because we don't want it to just be sin management, where all we're doing is we're always constantly trying to fight just the sin management. Got to keep myself from sin. Just try not to sin. Just try not to sin. Just try not to sin. That can become like, don't think about red monkeys while you're trying to make gold, right? So that can't be your focus. It has to be a focus, but it cannot be your primary focus. You need to shift then to what is godly and holy and good. Okay? So focus on, if you're married, how am I going to make this marriage even better? What am I going to do to love my spouse, in my case, love my wife, in a way that just makes her love me more? I mean, I know y'all think that that would be an easy thing to do, to make her love me more, but it's a hard job, right? She nodded, but she amen. She's quiet, but that was a quiet Tanya amen. Yes, he can be difficult. Yes, but instead of always, I'm starting at the bottom of the list, aren't I? Yes, I'm going to start at the bottom of the list, because I'll get myself in trouble first. You should, I'm going to read that again. That's right. You should be the blessing that you are hoping they will be. You do it first. You do it first, right? It's very easy to get into a mode of, well, they're not pleasing me in this way or that or the other. They don't laugh at all my jokes, you know? She doesn't laugh at all my jokes. That is true. But, she's not laughing at all my jokes. Well, be funny. Work on yourself. That's probably what she would say. Is that right? Yeah, she amened again. It's a second amen. See, y'all are starting to like this sermon better now at the last second. Yeah, she amened again. So work on yourself. Don't put all the weight on the other person. I think this is very important. Put the weight on yourself. Not to be guilt, but to be able to say, okay, well, if I want her to get excited again, for the ladies, if I want him to be excited again, then how can I make that happen? Okay? You be the spouse you want your spouse to be first. If it's even just, I don't know. I'm not even going to get into a list. Y'all make your own list. You do it yourself. It'll be DIY. All right? I guess we'll continue to go backwards. If you're dating, date with intentionality and be honest with yourself. What are you in that relationship for? If you are there, maybe it is. You're at a stage in your life where it's just a lighter relationship. You're not looking to get married, maybe. That's perfectly okay as long as you're godly in the way that you live that relationship, as long as you're faithful to the Lord. Okay? That's all right. Be honest about that with yourself. Be honest about that with the other person. Don't seek things in that relationship that you know you have no godly right to. Okay? Be honest with yourself. If you are hoping that that goes farther, then you start acting like you want that to be a godly marriage today. Not, well, after we get married, we'll start being Christian again. Be a Christian today. Be kind today. Be respectful of their boundaries today. Okay? So start from the beginning, understanding what you're doing. And I know sometimes those things change. Reevaluate, readapt, be godly every time. Single. If you're single, man, I can remember that a long, long time ago. I had hair when I was single. Did you do that? No, she did not amen that. Okay. Use this time in your life to grow, okay? Some of us have put our growth off until later. Use that time in your life to grow in your relationship with Christ. And I really want to stress this for a second. Don't let your singleness be a mark of shame. It is not. It is not. Being single is a holy thing just as much as being married is a holy thing. Be holy in your singleness. Learn to appreciate it. That doesn't mean stop looking for a husband or a wife. Maybe you're still looking, but appreciate the godly place where God has you right now for what it is. And ask the Lord to show you if you don't quite see it this way yet, to show you how He can use you in that place, in that time, and in that part of your life. Because it can be in its own way a big blessing. Paul said, I wish all of y'all would be as single as I am. Then he has to concede very shortly after that, but I know that's not possible. Some of you would go to hell if you were single as long as I am. He does say that, by the way. He says, if it's going to cause you to go to hell, get married already, okay? But be intentional and make wise decisions in the way you do that. Don't marry just to avoid hell. You better pick better than that. I know people who have picked that way, and it became its own hell. Okay? Be careful. Be wise in the way that you approach that with really, really good reasons. I think we're there. You feel better about that now? We're done. All right. So let me wrap this up. God really, really loves you. That may not be what you thought at the beginning of these verses. God really, really loves you, and He loves you exactly where you are at this moment. He has ways for you to be holy, ways for you to be fulfilled, and ways for you to be God-honoring right where you are right now. One of those ways is to be honest about some of the ways Satan derails us, and really honest about where they begin, and really honest about how to get rid of those things and to walk in freedom instead of in slavery. Pray about this. Ask the Lord to help you to see it the way Jesus sees it. Ask the Lord to help you to see yourself the way Jesus sees yourself. Because when you understand who you are in Christ, some of these temptations do wane, and you start to be able to see things in a different way.